from what I know of him, I mean, you guys all know him too. Do you think he'd ever back away? But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to call him. This is what I think. No, it'll pass the House. I think there's a chance it'll pass the Senate even when he's gone. And I think there's a lot of different ramifications for that. Now, I haven't had a discussion with the Dems that if he did resign, would it not happen? Now, this is one personal fear I have. I do not want to get into any conversations about Pence party or anything like that. I mean, the only discussion I would have with him is that I think this will pass, and it would be my recommendation we should resign. I mean, that would be my take, but I don't think he would take it, but I don't know.
That is, of course, audio of Kevin McCarthy back just 4 days after the insurrection, talking with other Republican leaders about what can potentially be done by the caucus to censure him, to try to get the 25th Amendment to be invoked. But particular to Kevin McCarthy there, that he is going to suggest to Trump that he resign. And I am so glad that that audio was made available. It was broadcast last night on Rachel Maddow because it followed just earlier that day, reporting coming from the New York Times, which will be featured in the book that you saw in that video, that these sorts of conversations had been happening. And between the reporting and the video that you just saw, McCarthy came out and called the reporting, quote, totally false and wrong. His spokesman denied that the Republican leader told colleagues he would urge Mr. Trump to leave office. McCarthy never said he'd call Trump to say he should resign. Well, as you heard, that is exactly what McCarthy said he was going to tell to Donald Trump. Now, we don't know if he actually did end up doing that, and obviously it didn't happen, but it is clear that he was telling Republican leaders that that's what he would be pushing for. Well, so you got to see right there the response to the original reporting. Now we have the audio. What is their response to that, to their, apparently sort of their bluff of being called? They didn't have a request for comment after the Times published the audio clip on Thursday night.
Yeah.
Not as fired up to attack the fake news media once you've seen the audio receipts.
Yeah, okay, but don't celebrate too much. So I'm gonna break this down a lot, but first let me just tell you, like the mainstream media and Democrats are acting like we got him. Yeah, we got him. It's the most obvious lie of all time. He said, I never did that. Then there's him on audio saying, doing that thing he said he never did, calling for Trump's resignation and having a discussion about it with Republican leaders, etc. But I'm going to counter with, so what?
No, we got him. He lied.
Wow.
You just heard it.
Okay, so number one, this is what Washington doesn't understand the rest of the country does. We all already know politicians are liars. But in Washington, that's like, oh my God, Kevin McCarthy was caught in a lie. Oh, this will doom him. You guys are hilarious. Okay, second of all, Republicans, how clear do they have to be, the voters? They don't care about lying at all. Their dear leader is a guy who told what, over 10,000 lies while he was president, and they loved every minute of it. Kevin McCarthy is not at all in trouble with Republican voters for lying. They don't view lying as a weakness, they view it as a strength. Hey, yeah, if you got a lie to own the libs, then you lie, who cares? Just exert power, right? No, the only reason that why he'd be in trouble is because they think, oh, he's a fake lunatic. And we would like a real lunatic, like Donald Trump or Marjorie Taylor Greene. And so, oh, McCarthy's been faking that he's one of us as like deranged, idiotic, pathological liar. It turns out he was even thinking of asking Trump to resign for creating a bloody riot that tried to overthrow democracy. They don't think, oh, okay, it turns out Trump did it. They think, oh, it turns out McCarthy betrayed the riot to overturn democracy that we absolutely loved. You're not understanding Republican voters. That's to this day, the Democratic Party and the mainstream media think like, oh man, wait till Republican voters get a load of this. I mean, they will just be outraged, just in the same exact way we are. No, they don't think like you, get it through your thick head. Okay, I got a lot more on that, but I'm gonna tease one thing before I go to Jessica. It turns out Kevin McCarthy doesn't know anything about Washington either, and neither does Mitch McConnell, and that's amazing given the assumptions that they had. And the quote there that should not be we shouldn't gloss over, is they were having a discussion about Pence pardoning Trump because all of Republican leadership thought it was obvious that Trump had committed crimes that day. Wow, now that's a story. Now, of course, they all say, well, it's your crimes. We love crimes. We love Republican voters like that. Oh, yes, yes. We committed many crimes that day. I love Donald Trump for committing those crimes. That's what Republican voters want to hear, right? They're not gonna look at this and be like, oh, turns out McCarthy knew all along that Trump had committed crimes. We were all wrong. We'll now be against Donald Trump. All right, Jessica.
Yeah, I think the Republicans have created a beast that they can no longer control. And we've got these mainline party Republicans like McConnell and like McCarthy, and they're not populist. They don't identify with the Trump brand of republicanism. And it's at the point where the Republicans need to be telling that story in order to win because they need those voters to win. Even with the Trump voters, they don't have the majority. And now there's this weird situation where the Republicans are caught in a lie, not this lie, but the lie that the messaging that they need to tell to win is populist rhetoric. The story they have to tell the public is populist rhetoric, but that doesn't match how they legislate. That doesn't match how McConnell and McCarthy legislate. And I think January 6th was really the first taste of what it means to tell this dangerous story, this brand of right-wing populism, because now it's affecting their safety personally. Like they can't enjoy the same comfortability and wealth and luxury when the story they have to tell to stay in power leads to people violently storming the Capitol where they work.
Exactly, yeah, and they know that they live in a system where it's entirely possible that January 6th will be seen as the quaint insurrection at some point. I'm sure we'll report on that at some point.
Yeah. No, by the way, next time they're gonna do it right. They're not gonna do an insurrection like they did this time. That was pointless anyway. They're just gonna go to the fake electors. Sure. That was the actual coup. Navarro and Bannon have admitted it. Trump was a part of it. But the idiot Democrats keep focusing on the people with no power because they think they're easier to beat up on. But when it comes to Republicans with real power, Democrats wet themselves. And so that goes to the second thing I was gonna say about the misunderstanding of McCarthy and McConnell. Throughout the calls, McConnell's like, oh, the Democrats will take care of them for us. Have you met the Democrats? McCarthy's like, oh, they're definitely gonna impeach him, and then we'll probably have enough votes in the Senate, including Republicans, because they need 2/3 to convict Trump. Have you met the Republicans?
Well,
so it's stunning to me, John, that they don't seem to have any idea how Washington works, and that's the leader of the Republicans in the House. There was no chance that Democrats were going to effectively counter Trump, none. Pelosi and Schumer are the weakest people you've ever seen in your life, and there was no chance that the Republicans were going to convict. And this is how fascism wins. When they do violence and the other political actors in the country are too weak to resist it and eventually bow their heads to that violence.
Well, he definitely did that. And look, many of them seem to think that there could have been some sort of accounting. I mean, every one of them that came out in the days after the 6th and said that it was Trump's fault, basically all of them have reversed on that, but they were all telegraphing that they thought, well, surely now there will be some sort of consequence. This must have been a line that we can't cross after crossing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines. But I agree, they would eventually bow their head to it. And if you bow your head long enough and enough of you bow your head, you get to enter into a particularly sick situation, which I'm not gonna describe. So I largely agree with you. It doesn't seem like Kevin McCarthy is in much trouble, as we'll soon describe. But I saw an article on The Hill. The headline was, McCarthy's future hangs in limbo as Washington awaits Trump's response. So like, apparently Trump's gonna be fine with him. I'm gonna read the quote in just a sec. But the idea is that Trump inspired a coup. People died as a result. He tried to end democracy. Kevin McCarthy, for a brief moment, responded kind of how maybe we'd want him to. Like he thought that was unacceptable.
He responded accurately because he thought he was going to die.
Sure,
right?
And some of the others did.
Right.
He was finally not awful for a brief moment. And because now it's been revealed that for that brief moment, he wasn't the absolute worst, his future might be over. I mean, it probably isn't, but that's the presentation. Trump isn't gonna face any consequences. It's the people who thought this was a bridge too far that might face consequences. And look, apparently, maybe that's not even gonna happen. McCarthy apparently called Trump right after the audio was released. The former president wasn't upset about McCarthy's remarks and was glad the Republican leader didn't follow through, which Trump saw as a sign of his continued grip on the Republican Party, according to 3 people who spoke on condition of anonymity. So, who knows? Trump can say one thing and an hour later say the exact opposite. For all we know, he's gonna be doing stand-up bits about how McCarthy is a rhino at his next rally. But for now, it looks like he's perfectly fine with him. And it does seem to be a reminder, at least of a time when he had a tight grip on the party. We can evaluate as the election goes on if that's still the case. We'll see. Some of the Republicans most I would say are largely defending McCarthy. Matt Gaetz did tweet attacking him, saying, GOP leader, you should have trusted my instincts, not your own. And I agree, actually. From the point of view, Kevin McCarthy, he probably should have. Now, they're not instincts about democracy. There's nothing moral or ethical about Matt Gaetz's instincts. He just sort of knew, no, I know what the base is like. They're gonna be perfectly fine with this. We're gonna find a way to spin it. We're gonna call it Antifa one day, and then the next day it's gonna be Patriots or whatever, and eventually we'll be perfectly fine. And his instincts were right.
Yeah, I think we always get this really tight messaging from the Republicans that they invest so much money into. How do we spin this story to keep winning essentially the culture war, right? And it's very Wizard of Oz. And I feel like the curtain was lifted a little bit. We got to see that actually McCarthy doesn't support this violent insurrection at the end of the day. And I think that's the most interesting piece of this, is that of course they're going to keep telling whatever story they have to win. But that little peek behind the curtain for me is really satisfying to know that there are some people in there who don't actually support the end of democracy in our country.
Well, yeah, the only modification I would make is you said at the end of the day. I would say at the noon of the day. By the afternoon, he was back to supporting, and he's perfectly fine with it. You were right. Initially, he didn't like it.
I accept.
Yeah, at the sunrise of the day, they didn't accept their own death and the death of democracy. But by 9 a.m., they were totally cool with it, right? And having coffee.
Right.
So look, final takeaway from this story is the rest of the media will tell you that the takeaway is that Kevin McCarthy lied and that American people are outraged by it. That is not true. Kevin McCarthy did lie. Democrats and a small portion of independents are outraged by it. The Republicans are outraged, but not by his lies, but because he wasn't willing to lie quickly enough for Donald Trump and accept his own fate. And if remember, they were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," who's a Republican, not a Democrat, when they stormed the Capitol. And next time, Kevin, as Trump said to him on that day, remember that story broke a long time ago. McCarthy called him on that day from the bunkered Capitol. And Trump said to him, well, apparently those rioters care more about this country than you do, Kevin. And so basically saying, next time, maybe they'll get you. And that's what McCarthy's waiting for now politically, waiting to see if the Republican voters will get rid of him because he objected to a violent riot against our democracy.
Yeah. Heads up to the director. I want to skip ahead to A3. Just curious how you'll respond. I mean, I don't think anything coming out of this, and apparently there are more tapes forthcoming, is going to break through. I mean, nothing does. Like the Mike Lee text that was gone after a couple days, Ginny Thomas gone, nothing lasts, nothing matters. But one of the things that was revealed was that apparently Kevin McCarthy wanted Twitter and Facebook, these big social media companies that the right loves to demonize, to pretend that they have an issue with, to strike back against some of the members of their own caucus. Take a look at this.
What McCarthy is talking about is he's hearing from his fellow GOP leaders on this call about some of the more bombastic tweets from far-right members of the House caucus who are, looking for any rationalization about the attack of January 6th. And McCarthy says out loud on this call, can't they take their Twitter accounts away too? He suggested that those big tech companies that he wants to crack down on actually should crack down members of his caucus, the very members who he is now courting assiduously to try to keep happy so that he has the votes to become speaker next year.
And we know that ever since Donald Trump was banned and eventually Marjorie Greene, or at least one of her accounts was banned, she still acts exactly the same. It's the most ridiculous ban ever. The right has loved to talk about that. That's like the biggest imposition on American liberty that's ever happened. So again, none of this is probably gonna break through, but that's one detail, audio forthcoming. Does it have a chance?
Yeah, no, so again, the Republican voters have decided they like Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene way more than they like Kevin McCarthy. So this will only hurt McCarthy, but not for the reasons that mainstream media thinks, and almost for the exact opposite reasons. But one last thing I wanna go back to is, look, they thought that Mike Pence might have to pardon Donald Trump because Donald Trump had not only obviously committed a crime, but the Democrats would hold Donald Trump accountable. And I want to note that here we are now almost several years later, and the Democrats have not done anything to hold Donald Trump accountable. The Republicans were so wrong about Democratic weakness. They thought the Democrats would spring into action and hold Donald Trump accountable. And here we are, and the Democrats are the weakest people in America, the Democratic leadership, and have done absolutely nothing and are still cowering. Like, oh, should we do something? Should we throw it? I don't know. And we're the only ones telling you the reality. You turn on cable news, they think Nancy Pelosi is like a barbarian, strong conqueror. No, they're scared of their own shadow. And now I'm sure the Republicans have already recalculated. McCarthy and McConnell thinking, oh, we'll never make that mistake again. It turns out the Democrats are just little people to be pushed around and bullied into submission. And they're largely right with this current crop of Democratic leadership, for sure. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.